Hi. There are some problems around the house that people really avoid solving because they have to do with plumbing. There seems to be a mystery in plumbing. Well, we're going to take the mystery out of the plumbing for you today. We're going to show you how to install a kitchen sink, how to install taps, even how to fix leaky taps. We'll show you how to install shutoff valves under the sink. And the age-old problem of a clogged drain line. Should you use a snake or should you use a plunger? And if you use a plunger, which is the best one to use? But let's deal with this dripping tap. It's really dripping badly and we have to fix it. But before I can take it apart and show you how to fix it, we'll have to shut the water off. So I'm going to have to go to the main shutoff valve where the water line comes into the house. So I'll be right back. Now that the water's shut off, we can get started. We have an assortment of washers and the necessary tools: a basin wrench, vice grips, a screwdriver, and a monkey wrench. So let's get started. It's not as difficult a job to remove the seats and repair a dripping tap as you might think. And I'm going to show you some of the things that can be done. First, just a little hint. Be sure that you put the basket or strainer in the drain. You don't want to lose any small parts down that drain and have to go on a fishing expedition. Next, take the button out of the top of the tap and start to remove the bolt. Now it may be corroded in there a little bit, so you may have to put some pressure on that bolt. There, it's coming loose now. I'd suggest before you try to take that handle off that you turn it a little so that it's loose and free and be easy to take the cartridge out, because that's what we're looking for, is the cartridge. You'll find that that bolt may come out by hand. Now this may be the tough part, taking off the handle. When you get a hold of it, you may have to work it a little bit there, and off it comes. Now we're down to the cartridge. That's the part right here. Set the monkey wrench, adjust it so that you can turn it, and you'll find that it may be just a little bit sticky. That one's coming away fairly easily. I think I can turn it by hand now. Takes a few turns. Now we have it out. This cartridge comes in two parts, and you'll find that there's a washer on the end of the cartridge, and as we take it apart, you'll find there's an O-ring. There are the two parts. The O-ring is right here. The washer is on this end. I use a scratch-all, which is pointed. I don't drop this, and boy, that particular O-ring was cracked. It didn't take much to take it out. And then we'll remove the washer. You have to hang on to it. I don't think you'll need a wrench or pliers to hold it. Bolt comes loose, and sometimes that washer will pop right out. This one is fairly loose. Now there are two basic types of washers available. There's a flat washer, which this one is, and there's a shouldered washer, like that. And I think you can see the shoulder on this one. Be sure to use the proper washer. This is a flat one that we're using on this cartridge. And this looks like the right size. Got it the first time. Put the bolt back in place, and you'll probably be able to thread it in by hand most of the way. Then use the screwdriver. Now, replacing the O-ring. There are several different sizes, and obviously this is not going to be the right size. It's a little too large to fit on there. But I think that's the old one. There, that one should fit. Looks to be the right size. If you have trouble getting the O-ring down over this part of the cartridge, the shaft, you may want to coat it with a little bit of liquid dishwashing detergent, and be sure you get it into the right place. Scratch-all can be used like a shoehorn. There we are. See, that wasn't difficult at all. Now we've changed two washers. There is a third washer, and that's on what I'll call the nut part of this cartridge, and it fits right on here. Now, if you don't have the fiber washer in place, you'll find that it may leak around the handle some water. This is a tight fit because you have a new O-ring on there. Now, before we put it back in place, there's another area that you should look at, and that'll be the seat. And the seat is inside the tap. If you run your finger around the inside of this tap, you'll find that it may be smooth, it may be rough, it may be cracked, in which case it's time to replace it. You'll use a basin wrench. Now you'll find that there are octagon-shaped and square-shaped ends, 3 different sizes. That's because the hole in the middle of the seat is either octagon or square. Again, this may be a little stiff. There we are, it's coming out now. Takes several turns to get this out. And by the feel of this one, when I had my finger in there, that seat was fairly smooth. I'm going to take it out just to show it to you. Now, you may have to go on a fishing expedition here with a pair of needle-nose pliers. Fortunately, I got this one out fairly easily. You'll find by running your finger around on this that it's quite smooth, and this particular one, so we'll put it back in place because we don't have to replace it. You know, there are different types of taps available, and one of the more common ones today is the washerless tap. Now that's quite easy to repair. There are not a lot of washers, as you can imagine from the name, to be replaced. There is a cartridge, and this is the type of cartridge that you'll find in a washerless tap. Easy to fix that. You just throw it away and put a new one in. My advice is, don't throw it away until you have the new one and you've tried it in place, because if the new one doesn't work, you'll be able to put the old one back in till you get the proper cartridge. And one other little tip: don't start on a Sunday or on a holiday, because your favorite lumber yard may in fact be closed, or your hardware store, and you won't be able to find the parts. If this old cartridge that you took out was damaged, and that's possible, you could get a new cartridge to put in its place. When the new one's in or the old one's been repaired and put back in place, it's time to put the tap back together by putting the handle on. Don't forget to put the bolt back in using the proper screwdriver, tightening it down, and then putting the little clip back in on the top of the handle. Now that was fairly easy to do. I think you'll agree. Anyone can do it with the right tools. If you've decided you are going to put new taps in, then maybe it's time to replace the sink too. We'll show you how to do that next. If you've decided to remove the taps and replace them, and remove and replace the sink, I'll show you how. First, we have to cut the water lines to the tap, then loosen them up so we can take them out, take off the drains and the trap underneath the sink, loosen the sink, and pull it out. But we can only start by going underneath the sink. So let's start there. When you're working under the sink, you're in very confined quarters. So I'd suggest that you have all of the tools handy before you get in there. First thing that we're going to do is loosen the nuts on the bottom part of the sink where the taps are fastened. Now it's pretty difficult to get a wrench up there or get both hands up there. So there is a special wrench that can be used. I hope you can see it here. It has a spring-loaded head so that it'll lock onto the nuts. It also is swiveled so that you can turn it to whichever direction you want it, so you can loosen or tighten those nuts. Now this is so confined that we can't even get the camera in here to show it to you, but I'm sure you'll be able to hear it loosening here. And it doesn't take too long, providing they aren't corroded. There, that one's loose. Loose enough to get it undone with my fingers. And there are 2 washers up there that the nuts hold up against the underneath part of the countertop. There's the first nut. The second one, going to be a little more difficult. I have the trap right here in my way. That's loose. Loose enough to get it off with the fingers. As you can see, it is a little tight in here. When these taps were installed, unfortunately, they were soldered right into place. And so we're going to eventually cut these water lines to loosen the taps completely. The next step, if I can find the screwdriver, will be to loosen all of the clamps holding the sink in place. Now, I've taken most of them out ahead of time because there's 6 or 7 of them there. I have the last one, and it has a slotted head on it. It also has a nut type head, so if you could get a wrench up in there, you might be able to loosen it. But I found the screwdriver really does the job. Wish we could get the camera in here to show you, but it's just too tight. There we are. There's the type of clamp that goes up on the sink to hold it and pull it up tight so that it isn't loose in the opening. The last thing to be loosened up before we get to cutting these water lines is the drain line. Now, one of the things that you want to be sure of is that you have a sponge handy, because in fact there may be still some water in these lines. It's pretty difficult to empty it out. I know it'll be in the trap when we go to remove that trap. You'll find, I think, that these are just hand tightened. Now, there is a wrench available, and it's an adjustable, find the right one, an adjustable wrench so that it will fit and will adjust over top of that nut. But these are just hand tightened. There, they have a pressure type washer on them, and when we pull that sink out, everything will come out. Oh, that other one's tight. There. There, that's coming loose. Now, if we were to lift that sink, providing the taps were out, it would come free and clear and be ready to place the next one in. In cutting the water lines, a special tool is available for cutting the copper lines, and it simply fits on like that. This becomes a little bit of fun. I may end up taking a shower here. So I'll keep the sponge handy. And I think you can see that this moves around the pipe. And as I move it around the pipe, there's a wheel here that has a sharp edge and cuts right into the pipe. And I'll apply pressure with this screw. There's also 2 little wheels that hold onto the pipe and allow me to move it quite easily. Applying more pressure, and it's cutting in. It's very easy to do. It's a lot better than trying to get under here with a hacksaw, I'll tell you. Oop, there we are. There's the first one cut. And what we'll do eventually, so we don't have this problem again of having to solder everything in, is to put in a shut-off valve. And that'll be slid right over top of the copper pipe and fastened to supply tubes. There'll be no soldering to be done underneath this sink at all. And we'll show you how to do that. In fact, I think I'll take you to the workshop where there's a little more room and we can talk about cut-off valves and how to select the right one for your particular job. Now, if we can try and line this up so they at least look to be even. Now we'll show you how easy it is to take those taps out once we've cut the water lines. Now, isn't that easy? We'll put them in the sink and lift the sink out, providing we have everything disconnected. It should come out just like that. Now, I can either throw this away or plant geraniums in it, but I'd like to take you to the workshop where we have a special countertop prepared to show you just how easy it is to install taps and a sink. Hi, I've just finished cutting the sample of a countertop that we're going to show you how to install a sink in. But let me show you first how we planned and how we laid out that countertop. With every sink there's a template, and the template is part of the cardboard carton that houses the sink. Cut the template out of the top of the box, lay it down on the countertop, centering it. And supposing you wanted to have the sink centered at 50 inches in your countertop. Measure in the 50 inches at the front, measure in the 50 inches at the back, and be sure to mark the front and the back clearly. Then lay the template down, centering it on those marks. Now you'll notice that you're able to run the pencil all the way around, and it doesn't have to be an exact perfect line, and you end up back here where there's a template for the taps. Now be sure to mark, if you have a 2-hole or 3-hole set of taps, where those holes are to go, so you'll know exactly, and the taps aren't set off center. Then remove the template and discard it, and you'll follow with your electric jigsaw all the way around that line as I've just completed. Then you'll be lifting this center piece out, but before I do that, I'd like to show you the holes. Remember, we marked them on the template, and you've used a 3/4 inch or 1 inch bit to drill the holes so that you can set your taps in. Now we'll just lift this center part out to show you what it looks like, and you may want to keep it because you can trim it up, cut it up square, and use it for setting plants on or whatever. So don't throw it away. Now there's our countertop, all cut out, ready to install the sink. Now that we're rid of the old kitchen sink, I made it into a planter in the backyard, we're going to show you the 5 basic steps for installing a kitchen sink in your countertop. Now we have the sink on the workbench upside down to make it easier for you to see each of these 5 steps. First, we're going to show you how to install the drains. Secondly, how to install the clamps that secure the sink in the counter. Then number 3 is going to be installing the faucets. Number 4 will be installing the supply tubes. And number 5, how to install the shut-off valves. But first, let's install the drains. The drain should have putty put around it, and I generally make it into a little rope like that. And don't worry about how much putty you put on, because when you tighten it up, it's going to squeeze out. Install it through the hole in the sink. Then there's a washer goes on top, and a cover which actually sandwiches the sink between the drain and the cover. Then a nut to hold everything in place, and this is the nut that when you tighten it down, it'll squeeze everything, and you'll find when we turn the sink over that the putty will in fact be squeezed out, and you'll have a nice tight seal there. Then the last thing will be the tailpiece with the plastic seal. The nut holds it in place, and we'll just hand tighten this because we can tighten it later with the wrench. And that's how you install the drains. I've almost completed step 2, securing the sink in the countertop. Now you'll use a clamp like this. The L shape slips into a bracket on the side of the sink, like this, and it tightens down. There is a seal, a soft seal on the underside of the rim of the sink that flattens out and seals the water out so it doesn't run under the sink. This means that you must go around to each one of these clamps a second time and make sure they're tightened up. Step 3, installing the faucets in the countertop. Of course, this is what you'll see from underneath the kitchen sink. We've put the tail pieces of the faucet through the holes that you pre-drilled. The next thing will be to put the washers and the nuts in place that will hold the faucets in tightly. And then we'll show you a wrench that you'll tighten those nuts with. An adjustable wrench that has a swivel head and a spring-loaded head, and this tightens the nuts right down. And I think you can see if you're laying under the kitchen sink, that's going to make it easy to do. Now it's time for step 4, installing the supply tubes. Remember how we had to cut off the water lines from the old sink? Well, you won't have to do this again because you won't be soldering the water lines in as was done with the old faucets. The end of the supply tube is shaped so that it fits right into the tailpiece of the faucet. A nut fits in place, tighten it down, and use the wrench to be sure that it's secure and snug. You have to measure, of course, from the end of the tailpiece on the faucet to your shut-off valve to determine what length your supply tube is going to be. This is the fifth and final step, installing the shut-off valves. We're going to simulate what you really see underneath your kitchen sink. Do you remember the water line that came up out of the floor of the kitchen cabinet? And we used the pipe cutter and cut off those water lines? Well, you're not going to have to do that again when you want to remove faucets because we're going to install a shut-off valve. Now, there are several different types of shut-off valves available. Some of them you have to solder in place. I prefer the type that you'll tighten with a pressure nut on it and a pressure seal so that you don't have to do any soldering in that confined area. The shut-off valve is installed on the water line, put in the supply tube, and you can tighten that up in place. Now you can shut the water off or turn it on as you require. Now we're just trying to get everything tightened in place. We'll hand tighten the nuts on the tail pieces leading to the drains from the sink. And I have all of the clamps in place on the sink except one. Let's try and get that in place here. Tighten it up. And these clamps hold the sink right down tight. Remember, we put caulking around there to seal it. And the last thing to do will be to tighten up with the wrench the nuts on the supply tube. First of all, on the copper part. That one's pretty tight. And then on the supply tube. And there. They're all in place and we're ready to use the sink. In the next segment, we're going to show you how to choose the proper supply tube and the proper shut-off valve for your particular job. Then we're going to give you some tips on soldering and the proper use and handling of plastic pipes. As promised, I'll show you how to select the proper shut-off valve. Now, there are several different types available, and I have 3 of them here. This is a straight-ahead valve, the type that we used where the water line came out of the floor and the supply tube went up to the faucet. However, this one is a little different. It's threaded on this end so that you can thread it onto a threaded pipe. The straight-ahead valve that we used had a pressure nut on one end for the copper pipe, and it had a pressure nut on the other end for the supply tube. Again, this is where the water line is coming out of the floor. If your water line happens to come out of the wall, you'll need a right-angled valve. And this particular one, you solder the pipe in, and it has a pressure nut here for the supply tube. So you can see the water coming out of the wall. Now, those are basically the 3 types of shut-off valves that are available. In the next 2 segments, we're going to talk about some handy tips on soldering copper, and we're going to show you how to glue joints and connections on plastic pipe. Cleaning the end of the pipe that you're going to solder really is one of the most important basic steps in soldering. And we're going to take some of the mystery out of soldering today. Add flux to clean that end and put a little flux in the connection you're going to make. Now, that pipe must be clean and dry, both inside and outside. If there's water lying in the line, you can tear up the center out of a piece of bread. Sounds a little funny, but you can. Stuff the bread back in the line. That'll keep the water from coming forward. Now, the important part is to heat the pipe. Don't just try and heat the solder. The pipe will melt the solder, You can see a little smoke coming out of there. That means we're making toast, so don't let that bother you. Wipe off the surplus solder. Now you can apply the connection and heat it. This will, when you heat the connection, it'll heat the solder, melt it into place, and as one last little piece of security, you can melt, by heating the pipe, melt solder into the joint. And you can see it begin to run around and bubble there. Now you've got a good secure joint. Next, we'll be talking about plastic pipes and how to make a secure joint with them. We're going to show you how easy it is to connect plastic pipe. First, you need a multi-purpose cement and a cleaner. And the cleaner is extremely important. Make sure that you have the end of that pipe cleaned. The solvent cleaner, by the way, flattens that out, takes the shine off of it, and cleans it. Clean the end of the joint on the inside that's to be connected. Now the glue, multi-purpose cement, has an applicator on the end, and you simply spread that multi-purpose cement around the end. Now, insert it into the joint and be sure that you have it in the right position where you want it, because once it's set, that's it. The next segment, we're going to show you how to clean traps, how to remove and replace traps, and how to use a snake to clean out a clogged line, and select the proper plunger for your cleaning job. In this segment, we're going to show you how to replace a trap. There are two basic shapes: the P-trap, where the drain line runs through the wall, and the S-trap, where the drain line runs through the floor. Now, to replace it, you loosen the nut attached to the tailpiece on the drain in the sink, and loosen the nut at the other end of the trap. Take this piece of trap off, take it to your hardware store, and get one exactly the same size, and then replace it. Next, we're going to show you how to clean those traps with a snake. In this segment, we're going to show you how to use a snake to clear a plugged drain line. Now, a snake is a stiff piece of wire with a handle on the end. Put it into the plugged line and work it back and forth, turning the handle as you go. You'll find that when you reach the blockage, this action will begin to clear it. Now, once you've cleared the blockage, run the water through and your line is clear. In the next segment, we're going to show you how to select a plunger and how to use it. In this segment, we're going to show you how to use plungers, or lovingly called by some, the plumber's helper. When you're going to use a plunger, and this particular one is used to clear the drain lines in a sink, a bathtub, or a basin, you place the plunger over the drain and push down. Now, in a basin and in a bathtub, you'll find that there is an overflow. And that overflow means that when you push down on this over the drain, the air backs up in the overflow and does not go down the drain and does not clear that drain. So you must plug the overflow. Plug it with a piece of tissue, a paper towel, or a cloth. But you must prevent the air from coming back through the overflow. Now when you push down hard, the air is going to go down the drain and clear that clog. This particular plunger is a little different, and it can be used for clearing drains in sinks, basins, or bathtubs, but particularly in a toilet, because there's a collar that fits right down in the drain, and when you push down on the handle, the air is forced down the drain, not out and around the plunger. So be sure you pick up the proper plunger to do the job that you're required to do.